Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: in response to China's rare earth ban, the U.S. is moving to tighten trade loopholes with steep new tariffs. New U.S. tariffs are drawing mixed reactions across Indo-Pacific countries. We look at their responses. China is demanding security proof from Nvidia, raising dubious claims about trust and potential risks with U.S. imported chips. We speak to a senior national security editor for insights. And U.S. lawmakers across the aisle now seeing eye to eye on the China threat. The Senate's defense bill calls for rapid military modernization, aiming to counter the growing challenge from the Chinese Communist Party.
One thing they have in common, they hate us.
Beijing's move to restrict rare earth exports to the U.S. is adding a sense of urgency in Washington. The Trump administration wants to reduce supply chain risks tied to authoritarian regimes. Now, the White House is rolling out a new tariff policy set to take effect next week. It imposes duties of up to 40% on goods that bypass existing tariffs through transshipment. The goal is to focus precisely on the true country of origin. While China remains the clear target, the new rule stops short of naming specific nations. After President Trump imposed what are now called reciprocal tariffs on China during his first term, Beijing and Chinese manufacturers quickly built overseas warehouses. Those manufacturers then routed goods through other countries to avoid U.S. tariffs. But that loophole is about to close. On Thursday, the White House announced a new rule targeting transshipments. Within 7 days, U.S. Customs will start imposing an extra 40% tariff on goods that dodge current duties by passing through other countries. This time, the rules are stricter. If a product doesn't undergo substantial transformation in the transit country, it will be considered transshipped and face penalties. Substantial transformation means a product must be significantly changed in another country to count as made there. If it's only minor work, then the product is still seen as coming from the original country and tariffs apply. This rule is based on provisions already included in the U.S.-Vietnam trade agreement. And there's more. The New York Times reports that Washington will soon roll out new rules to better track where products actually come from. Similar to the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, these rules will require, for example, at least 75% of a car or auto parts components come from North America. This is needed to qualify for duty-free border crossing. China now has a new deadline to reach a longer-lasting tariff deal, August 12th. President Donald Trump made the decision to grant China more time on Thursday. At the same time, Trump slapped steep tariffs on exports from dozens of countries, including Canada, Brazil, India, and Taiwan. He is pushing ahead with his plans to reorder the global economy ahead of Friday's trade deal deadline. Here's more.
U.S. President Donald Trump slapped steep tariffs on dozens of countries ahead of a Friday trade deal deadline that has now expired. An executive order signed Thursday sets rates for 35% on many goods from Canada, while Brazil was hit with a 50% tariff. In all, goods from 67 countries, the EU and Taiwan will get hit in a week's time, 7 days after the August 1st deadline. Any not on that list get a 10% tax, lower than Trump had previously said. Canada's rates, however, were set in a separate order to 35%, up from 25%. In it, Trump said Canada had failed to cooperate in curbing illicit flows of narcotics into the U.S. Trump complained to reporters earlier that Canada had been very poorly led. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said he was disappointed by Trump's decision and vowed to take action. It was all in sharp contrast to Mexico, which was given a 90-day extension to give more time to hash out a broader trade deal. Meanwhile, China is facing an August 12th deadline to reach a longer-lasting tariff deal. Beijing and Washington had only reached preliminary agreements in May and June to end their back-and-forth escalation in tariffs and a cutoff of rare earth materials. When Trump first announced his trade policies in April, they sparked a sell-off in the markets. But this time, reaction has so far been more muted. Stocks and equity futures fell modestly in Friday morning trading in Asia.
Tariff revenues hit a new monthly record in July. According to Treasury data, collections topped $28 billion, surpassing the previous record of $27 billion set in June. Reactions are coming in from around the world to President Trump's latest tariffs. Some have welcomed the reduced rates, while others are pushing for even lower figures. Here are a couple of responses from Indo-Pacific countries. First, Japan's chief cabinet secretary is discussing the country's new tariff rate of 15%. Take a look.
We believe that the recent executive action, based on a series of agreements, will help reduce uncertainty surrounding U.S. trade policy and lessen the risk that such policies could negatively affect the Japanese and global economies.
The United States has today announced a new tariff regime which increases tariffs on New Zealand goods entering the US from 10 to 15%. This is a disappointing development.
So far, the negotiations have achieved some interim progress. The tax rate has been reduced from 32% to 20%. However, the 20% tariff rate was never Taiwan's target to begin with. We will continue negotiations and strive for a rate that's more favorable for Taiwan.
Australia, meanwhile, said an unchanged rate of 10% is a vindication of Prime Minister Albanese's calm diplomacy with the U.S.
Taiwan President Lai Ching-te said on Friday that rates for semiconductors, electronics, and information and communication technology will have separate U.S. sectoral tariffs. These rates are still to be worked out. Taiwan manufactures more than 90% of the world's leading-edge chips. China's state-run newspaper People's Daily is calling on Nvidia to provide what it describes as convincing security proofs for its H20 AI chips. This demand came Friday amid Beijing's efforts to cast doubt on the U.S. imported chips. Authorities allege the chips pose location tracking risks. Nvidia responded by saying cybersecurity is a top priority and that their chips don't have any backdoors allowing remote access. Brandon Weichert, senior national security editor at the National Interest, says China's concerns may reveal something deeper.
Well, I think it's a classic case of projection. The Chinese have been sending us technology as part of various trade deals for decades, in which we now know they were basically poison pilling them. They were lacing them with surveillance technology and other backdoors for them to get into, whether it be hardware or software. So I think the Chinese are probably a little worried that we might start doing the same to them. Unfortunately, I don't think we're that smart. But it's certainly a concern for them because they've been doing it to us.
Weichert says China's reaction may also stem from suspicion over the U.S. suddenly allowing chip sales after years of restrictions. He suggests Beijing could be wondering if there's more behind the AI export policy reversal.
Well, I think the issue is the Chinese know we've been very resistant to the idea of handing over these high-end chips to the Chinese. And now suddenly the Trump administration is authorizing the sale. The Chinese government is understandably very paranoid. And I think they're asking themselves, why are the Americans really doing this? Because again, if the Chinese were in our position and they decided to reverse course on such a long-term policy, it would not, and they would be very concerned that we were poisoning them, basically.
The commentary from Chinese state media comes just weeks after the U.S. lifted its export ban on H20 Nvidia chips. Since then, Beijing has raised concerns about how the chips might be used. China's Cyberspace Administration says it's worried about potential tracking features and wants Nvidia to explain any possible security risks. The Senate Appropriations Committee reached a bipartisan consensus to advance their version of the defense budget for fiscal year 2026. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has the details.
You've got authoritarian regimes coordinating with each other. The North Koreans, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranian proxies, all communicating. And the one thing they have in common, they hate us.
In a divided Congress, senators have found common ground when addressing U.S. national security threats, in particular the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party and its anti-American axis.
Deterring China standing with Ukraine, standing up to the increasing coordination of the People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, and the DPRK, and modernizing the DoD with a sense of urgency because the clock is ticking.
The bipartisan consensus in the Appropriations Committee yielded a nearly $40 billion spending cut, the second year in a row that defense spending is reduced, not increased.
This bill reduces waste and duplication by making hundreds of cuts to underperforming programs and realigning those billions of dollars in savings into higher priority programs.
It expands critical munitions production, including air and missile defense interceptors, long-range missiles, and next-generation hypersonic weapons developed by our most innovative firms. It funds drone and counter-drone technologies.
The bipartisan bill also makes an important investment in the service members and their families.
From a pay increase for service members to robust child care funding to new investments in preventing suicide and sexual assault and conducting life-saving medical research. So I really appreciate the work that went into negotiating these important investments.
The Senate Appropriations Committee has already passed half of the funding bills for fiscal year 2026, and the full Senate is expected to have a vote on a trio of appropriation bills before the August recess. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
A panel on Capitol Hill on Thursday discussed a new film exposing the Chinese regime's cover-up of the COVID-19 pandemic. NTD's Sam Wong has the story.
I would recommend it to my whole family, the world, because everyone needs to see this.
I felt that what I was watching was a big giveaway with of accurate details that could actually be happening today.
Pages of history always turn. What side are you on? Will be the true heritage you leave for the generations to come.
On Capitol Hill, a panel Thursday discusses a new movie titled The Unrestricted War. The film portrays how the Chinese Communist Party systematically concealed the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic, which ultimately led to a global outbreak.
We hope it can spark meaningful reflections and conversations, and also give people the courage to make the right decision when facing a difficult situation like this.
How'd you even get these numbers? A drama based on true events, The Unrestricted War follows a Canadian virologist who spearheads a biotech venture in China. He is suddenly kidnapped by military agents in order to steal a sample of his own work from a Canadian lab.
They both exhibit high temperatures.
As people began to show signs of sickness, his conscience is put to test.
This is an absolutely stunning film. We must awaken to the reality that these people are intent on our destruction. Again, the Chinese Communist Party. And they are well advanced in accomplishing it through unrestricted warfare.
The film's title, Unrestricted War, comes from an actual strategy developed by a senior Chinese military officer. Its goal is to compromise nations from within through malign influence without firing a single shot.
Unrestricted war takes it to you, your families, in your bedrooms, in your businesses, in your family rooms, and on the street. It's everything short of war, everything short of conventional war. There's 150 methods to weaken your enemy from within, to make them capitulate and to take them out.
And the people who participated in the film's production are also victims of the CCP's unrestricted warfare.
We've been receiving harassments from the local government officials and warnings and threats from the National Security Office. And some of my family members' income got cut off by the local government.
The Unrestricted War premieres August 8th on Ganjin World Plus. For more information, be sure to visit gjw.us/unrestrictedwar for details. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Sam Wong, NTD News.
A nationwide fraud scheme targeting elderly Americans and their hard-earned savings. U.S. authorities charged 2 men with allegedly trying to steal over $18 million from elderly Americans across the country. Jiang Bingjiang was arrested in Staten Island, New York on Thursday. Xu Jianliu is still at large. Authorities say the scheme led to actual losses of more than $5 million from over 70 victims. Here's how the scheme worked. Victims would see a pop-up message on their computers urging them to call a phone number. The message claimed to be from a tech company, a bank, or even a government agency. Once victims called, they were tricked into withdrawing money from their bank accounts and handing it to a courier. Both men face a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison. Coming up, the FBI opening its first office in New Zealand to counter China. A look at the key issues they aim to tackle. President Trump spotlighting Europe's reliance on China and the wind industry during his visit to Scotland. Just how much control does China have over global new energy?
This also poses a problem of sovereignty for European countries.
And flooding battering Beijing for a week, leaving dozens dead and bridges and homes destroyed. We hear firsthand from residents and rescue workers on the ground.
Casualties are unavoidable, but we don't know the exact numbers. I saw a body pulled out today.
That and more in just a minute here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In a move to counter communist China, the FBI has opened a new office in New Zealand. FBI Director Kash Patel said Thursday this step will boost the U.S. and New Zealand's ability to counter China's presence in the Pacific region. Here are the details.
Some of the most important global issues of our times are the ones that New Zealand and America work on together. Countering the CCP in the Indo-Pacific theater, countering the narcotics trade, working against cyber intrusions and ransomware operations, and most importantly, protecting our respective citizenry.
Patel visited New Zealand to open the office. The FBI director says it will strengthen cooperation with the key partner in the Southwestern Pacific. The U.S. and New Zealand work closely on policy issues, including child exploitation and organized crime. China's increasing influence in the Pacific have brought the two countries closer together. They are both members of the intelligence sharing partnership known as the Five Eyes, which also include Australia, Canada, and the UK.
During his recent visit to Scotland, President Trump renewed his criticism of wind energy, calling it costly and environmentally harmful. He also highlighted concerns over reliance on China in the energy sector. NTD's international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
During his trip to Scotland, U.S. President Donald Trump lashed out at wind power, calling it a con job and a disaster for both the environment and the economy. While critics were quick to dismiss his remarks, Europe's own energy crisis suggests his claims may carry weight. Despite ambitious green targets, several EU countries are quietly walking back their reliance on renewables. In Germany, the wind turbine industry has declined by over 31% in the past 6 months, while coal and gas use have surged by 13% and 19% respectively across the bloc.
Yeah, I think windmills are a disgrace. I think they hurt everything they touch. They're ugly. They're very inefficient. It's the most expensive form of energy there is.
President Trump also highlighted that the EU wind industry's dependence on China. Energy policies expert Fabien Bouglet backs the concern.
The fact is that China is taking the lead in construction of wind turbines. It owns 80% of rare earth in the globe. It is also creating an industry based on the export of rare earths and on the export of permanent magnets used in wind turbines, made from rare earths. This also poses a problem of sovereignty for European countries.
Bouglet also warns that rare earth extraction in China is heavily polluting, a cost Europeans rarely see.
China holds the monopoly, and it's so polluting that they've moved extraction to Mongolia. In Baotou, you have radioactive mines, 32 times more radioactive than normal, and a toxic lake where acid waste is dumped after extracting neodymium, a metal used in turbines.
Trump also denounced the growing waste problem tied to wind energy, citing massive blade dumps in Texas and Wyoming, one with over 4,000 turbine blades. Bouglet says this problem is coming to Europe next.
When you look at photos from the Texas blade dump, it's striking. You see the blades of wind turbine need to be both flexible and hard, so they use things like balsa wood, and so the material used is not reusable. If you burn it, it produces fumes that cause cancer similar to asbestos cancer. There are 4,000 blades in this dump in Texas. In France, we have around 10,000 wind turbines. So that's about 30,000 pails that we will have to dump somewhere in our country in about 20 years.
France's government planned in July to invest $340 billion in renewables by 2035. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
As of Thursday, the official death toll from Beijing's week-long flood has risen to 44 people. 31 of those deaths occurred at a single nursing home. But questions remain about whether the official figures fully reflect the situation. We spoke with a first responder in Beijing's flood zone. She said authorities ordered them not to share details of the flood outside the area. To protect her identity, we have distorted her voice.
Casualties are unavoidable, but we don't know the exact numbers. I saw a body pulled out today. There were many landslides and quite a few houses did collapse. A lot of cars were submerged. Recovery is very difficult. The mud buried the vehicles, and the affected area is huge. The losses are significant.
Since earlier this week, Beijing and its surrounding region have been hit by heavy rains, causing widespread flooding and waterlogging. Local residents say the situation worsened after large releases of water from reservoirs.
The flood waters have receded, but the Pinggu Reservoir is still releasing water, and the current remains very strong. Earlier, the water rose over 6 feet. Many villages, roads, and houses in this area suffered severe damage. The farmers were hit hardest. Their crops were all destroyed. The orchards completely flooded, and there was nothing left to harvest.
At least 9 reservoirs repeatedly opened their gates at the same time on Wednesday. These rapid and powerful releases left many residents with little time to react before floodwaters reached their homes. Hostility against Japanese nationals in China appears to be on the rise. A Japanese mother and her son were attacked Thursday in the eastern Chinese city of Suzhou. They were reportedly hit by what appeared to be a rock. Both were taken to the hospital. Chinese authorities say their injuries are not life-threatening, and the suspect has been apprehended. This isn't the first time violence has targeted Japanese nationals in Suzhou. Just last year, another Japanese mother and child were injured in a knife attack in the same city. And last September, a 10-year-old Japanese boy was fatally stabbed by a Chinese man in another city. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. Round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you soon.